Hello, my name is Amara Wynn, and I am here talking to you about indie authors. This is the author series Between the Margins, where I sit down with brand new indie authors, long-standing indie authors, those who are trying to get the word out about their book, some who already have lots and lots of people who have read their book and trying to find out about their characters, their process, who they are, how do they get where they are. I ask the questions that maybe you want to know. And if you don't want to know, maybe you'll learn something new. If you are listening to this on a podcast forum, welcome. And if you are watching me on YouTube, uh, yeah, my shirt is way oversized and I'm sort of drowning in it today, but that's okay. It's okay. We got to be comfortable because this interview coming up is with Brian Mulliner and his book, Waters of Awakening, which is a very emotional book that I really felt tied to. So I was really excited to talk to him, and I hope you all enjoy it. In case you haven't, consider liking, subscribing. I'm sorry that my camera is doing some crazy things. I don't know why. But consider liking and subscribing, sharing with a friend. This is a great way for readers to connect with the authors and for authors to connect to readers and other authors to learn about others. It's doing these kind of interviews have been some of the best things I have done in a long time because I have spoken to some amazing people, and this gives everybody a chance to get to know the people that you're reading. But please remember that if you decide to read an indie author's book, that you leave a review because that's how other people find them. So consider liking, subscribing, and as always, I am an indie author myself. Here is my book. I'm disappearing into the background more today. I don't know what's going on with my camera. But I am an indie author more than I expected. Came out in, I believe, December, of maybe the end of November, December. And it is about a woman named Sydney Benton who is trying to figure out her course and path in life. And it is a romantic comedy with some heavy topics like grief and anxiety and trauma and mental health, but all handled in a very careful way. So I would love it if you would consider getting it. You can get it on Amazon, Amazon Kindle, Kindle Unlimited. You can also order a print copy from the major book outlets. So I would love it if you would consider getting it, but if not, please consider getting this next author, Brian Mulliner's book, and let's go ahead and start talking to him. Hello, my name is Amara Wynn, and this is the author series. And today I am sitting down with Brian Mulliner. Hello, Brian.
Hello.
And I'm going to read a little bit about Brian. Brian is a daydreamer. I love that. A nature enthusiast, a spiritual seeker whose journey has been shaped by wonder, grief, and grace. He is a lifelong lover of the outdoors, and he draws his deepest inspiration from the quiet beauty of mountain trails, forest paths, and the rhythm of the natural world. His writing reflects his Christian faith, his connection to the land, and his beliefs in the transformative power of grace, healing, and personal awakening. Brian's books, The Enchanted Forest and The Waters of Awakening, which I read that one, were born out of a season of deep introspection and renewal, which was woven with rich symbolism and scriptural truths, and his stories invite readers on a journey of identity, surrender, and hope. His characters echo his own search for meaning, shaped by childhood wounds, quiet revelations, and the steady pull of divine calling. He is a devoted husband, yay, to Linda Sue for over 3 decades. We'll ask what the secret is in just a few. And Brian's life is rooted in love, resilience, and a shared reverence for creation. And together they have walked through seasons of caregiving, of loss, and of healing, especially following the passing of Brian's father, whose final days were filled with treasured memories and sacred moments. Thank you, Brian, for joining me today.
Yeah, more than honored. Thank you for inviting me.
I'm excited. It took me a minute to read through your book because it was harder than I thought it was going to be to read. I guess I probably should have read the blurb before I just got it and started reading it. Way to put a girl in her feels. Tell
Yeah.
us about your books, Brian.
Well, appreciate for having me on the show. One of the things is I do I write and I want to have not only a lot of adventure and aspects to my book that draw the reader, keeps them on the edge of their feet, engages them, but I also want to reflect the inner journey that we all face. Being a human's not easy.
It's not.
We've
Oh,
been
it's
on
not.
this, yeah. We've all signed up for this gig on this planet. No, we didn't sign up for this gig, did we?
No.
And things like figuring out who we really are, some of those searches for identity, forgiveness, some of the harder emotions that we face, loss and betrayal. I think that's what really matters in life. I lost my dad 2.5 years ago, and it really put me into a tailspin. And it was through writing that I found joy, and I found some bright light in some dark days. And it really makes you reflect on what really matters most. And that's why in these books, you said it, gave you some feels. I wanted to intertwine in the story not only the physical journey, but also the inward struggle that we all face.
And you did that beautifully because I don't like to get into my feels so much. And you were like, no, here, take it, read it, enjoy it, live it. Thanks. They were
Yeah.
beautifully done though, which I'm guessing you knew people were going to get into their feels reading this. Your books really do connect to the Smoky Mountains quite a bit. I'm not that far from the Smoky Mountains. Actually,
Oh,
the base of them are no. Am I on the Smoky Mountain? Which ones are the Smoky Mountains? Why don't I know this? Yeah, Smoky's on the east side.
yeah.
Yeah. Wow. Gosh. Have you had one of those days where nothing makes sense? I'm at the base of the Smoky Mountains, so I live on a mountain going into that. So you obviously have a strong connection. What has the outdoors done to play into your life and to your creativity?
Yeah. So I live actually right by the Sequoia Birthplace Museum, Fort Loudon, Sevierville. And every morning I walk out. I have a dog, and dogs are the greatest thing if you want to get in touch with the outdoors because they have to walk a lot.
They do.
And so every day I have a path that I take that's about 2 miles long, and you're greeted by nature, by birds and squirrels, and every now and then you'll see a rabbit or a deer, and it just really feeds your soul. I know that I spent a good portion of my life living in the cities. I used to work in San Francisco in the financial district.
Oh
I,
wow.
I
Ugh,
spent time in Charlotte, North Carolina, in the financial district, and I spent time in Chicago. And it's fun. You have the really nice restaurants. You've got the fast pace of life. You've got the excitement. But at the end of the day, I find that my own spirit, um, after a while, that I get kind of claustrophobic, and I really yearn for the outdoors. And it's kind of funny. We have a term in our family. It's called forest bathing, and that's just going outside and just sitting and listening and soaking in all the goodness of nature.
yeah. Oh, this is going to try to make me record this that I'm already recording. I hate when it does that. As someone who is from Chicago, who moved to the South, I totally get it. It's a whole different life. And I never really expected to, I guess, enjoy nature because I wasn't used to it. So just being out there, and I'm near a waterfall, so we can hear a waterfall, and we've got these beautiful trees, and it's beautiful, and it's so relaxing in comparison to that fast-paced life. And working
Yeah.
in the financial district, can't even fathom what a difference from one to the next is. Now, was there this specific moment? I know that you mentioned that your father had passed, and I'm sorry for your loss. Was there a specific moment while you were going through this that you decided, okay, it's time for me to become an author?
Yeah. So, well, first of all, I've always dreamed of being an author. And when I was a kid, I was writing short stories. I was writing poetry. In seventh grade, I won a poetry contest, and then
Oh,
went into corporate America, and I was writing articles. I was writing curriculum, and so writing has always been part of my life. And so when my dad passed away, it just felt, it was an area that I've always tapped into, journaling. It was a way that I found joy. And also, it's kind of the way that I reflect on my emotions and my feelings.
Yeah.
sometimes I find it's easier to get it on a piece of paper than to tell somebody.
No, I get it. And I've been through that something similar. I had a loss 3 years ago.
Yeah.
So I lost my son 3 years ago, and that was the moment that I decided to stop living for everybody else and start reflecting inside. And that's when the writing started to take
Yeah.
off. So I totally understand how loss can do that, especially if you're close with your father.
Yeah.
That's tough. And we don't talk about grief and loss enough. I'm a firm believer that we need to be more open about it and not be ashamed and not be afraid to discuss grief.
Yeah.
And so I feel like your books, that's probably why it got me in my feels. Yeah. So the Waters of Awakening, and I'm going to pronounce her name incorrectly. Is it Aria?
Yeah. Area, so that's it's a male. And so
That's
area
what I mean.
is, yeah.
I'm
So
sorry.
yeah.
I'm reading this going that doesn't sound right. Is it area?
Yeah, area.
Okay. Aria goes on a very specific journey as well when it comes to spiritual and personal discovery.
Yeah.
I related harder than I thought I was going to. I thought I was going to read um you know what? I don't know what I thought I was going to read. I guess I just thought maybe something supernatural.
Hmm.
And I guess in a way it kind of was in a very spiritual way. What inspired his story to make you say, "Yes, I have to write his story"? What was his what made you come up with this character?
Yeah, great question. So the story arc really was birthed out of a number of things. First of all, my uncle wrote a book about 3 or 4 years ago. And in his research, he talked for about 10 years. He interviewed people from all over the Smoky Mountains. And he talked to a lot of folks who their families had immigrated here in the 1800s, Scottish families, Irish families, French families. And so a lot of their stories were very similar. They came to Tennessee with the promise of free land. They could have their own farm. Um, they got religious freedom. There were so many benefits. And so a lot of them came across the Atlantic and they landed in New York and they heard about this place called Tennessee and they moved here and they got hit immediately with hardship.
Yeah.
It was hard living here. And one of the things with the story arc I wanted to tell is again, I wanted that inner struggle. I wanted a storyline that actually pulled the learner through not only a physical struggle, but the emotional process of coming of age and really dealing with one's emotions. So since I had lost my dad, and I don't want any spoiler alerts here. So I wanted to make sure grief and forgiveness and all of that was in the book, but I don't want to spoil the book, but there's a couple things. So in my research, I found out that there's Cherokee lore in these mountains that's really strong. And one of them is the Cherokee had this mystical lake. And so if anybody's been up to Clingman's Dome, that was called Kuwa. And so up in that region, they had a mystical lake that supposedly it was like the fountain of youth, that if a warrior went into the lake and they were worthy, they would regain their strength and their youth. And so I heard about that in my research. I'm like, I got to put that in my book. And
Yes, it was
so,
amazing.
well, it became a really strong metaphor for the story and became the backbone, the spine of this journey of struggle and healing. And
That's what I
so,
love the most about it is that you really dive deep into struggle and
mhm,
people shy away from that. And it wasn't for shock value. It was reality. I'm
yeah.
sorry, continue. That was just a thought.
Well, no, yeah. I wanted the book to be real. And the more you research people in the 1800s, I went to Cades Cove and I went through all the graveyards and I looked at the dates on the tombstones, and most people died really young. And there's a ton of gravestones here in the Smokies where it says born and died on. It's the one date. So a lot of 50, I don't have the data, but I would say over half of babies died in childbirth. And then a lot of people died before they were even into their 20s or 30s.
Yeah.
And so the struggle was real. And so in writing the story, I found out about this Cherokee lore, and I didn't want it to be this magical, wonderful book where everybody drank sunshine. I wanted to feel real and convey to the audience the sense of a journey. Not I didn't want to preach at people. I didn't want to, here's the answers to life. Here's five easy ways to raise your children. I just I wanted it to
Are there
be,
five?
yeah, right. I wanted it
Only
to be
if
a
you have the
journey.
answer to that, could you please pass that
I
along?
I don't.
Okay. Yeah, I what I liked is that it was this whole beginning like he was a young blacksmith and I mean it really I could see it. I don't know how you read books, but when I read books, I oftentimes will play them out in my head like it's a movie.
Yeah.
And I really appreciated the fact that you did not shy away from the conversations of family wounds and identity. And is your own struggle related to that arc? Your own life related to that arc?
Well, first of all, I think all of us, if we are real with ourselves, um,
Nobody wants to be real
life
with
life isn't
themselves.
easy. And
No.
so there's two things that, so as far as myself, um, having just gone through losing my dad, I had the benefit. He moved in my house, and the last year of his life, um, I had the blessing, I'll put it that way, of caring for him. And there was a lot of heartfelt moments that were hard. There was a lot of joy and a lot of sorrow. And in those days of taking care of dad, I quickly realized that there are certain people in the family that hands off. I don't want to. I don't want to take care of dad. And I actually, in my heart, I'm being really transparent. And this is going to go out to the world. Um, I I had some resentment. And I'm sitting there going, "This is Pops. This is the guy who that raised us all, and show a little bit more respect." And so my own wounds and those own resentments, I had to work through those, and I'm still working through some of those. And so a lot of that just poured into the book. Matter of fact, I still remember I woke up at 3. So a lot of times the book comes to me in the middle of the night. And so when I was writing this book, 3 a.m. seemed like to be the magic number for me. So I woke up like at 3 in the morning, and the whole chapter, Season of Healing, I wrote that between 3 and 6. It just flowed out of my brain.
That was
And
my
then
favorite chapter.
around 7 o'clock in the morning, I read it and I just cried like a baby.
Yeah, that was the chapter that I was like, okay, and we're done. Like I just
Yeah, and I don't know where that came from, because I read that. I'm like, it was like somebody was talking at me. It was like somebody outside was talking to me, talking to my heart.
that's probably the reason why it took me longer because I don't know if I was quite ready to face a lot of the things that you were putting in my face. I needed it though. I needed to read it. I needed to feel it, but it was not easy. And I think
Mhm.
that's probably going to be the case for anybody who has suffered loss recently. But it was, I remember telling my husband, I was like, okay, whenever you're up and you're, because it was like around 11:30 at night, whenever you're up and you're awake, I'm going to need you to read this. And when I told him, because he could see that I'm not a crier. I keep saying that I'm not a crier. And he was like, I don't know what you read, but I'm not sure I want to read it. I was like, that's fair. But he did,
Yeah,
and he didn't get nearly as emotional as I did because he's a stoic man. But he was like, "Now I see your reaction, why it was like that. You
yeah.
really did like hold up a mirror in a way." So I want to say thank you for that, but no, because I didn't sleep at all that night.
No.
And I guess that really does lend to the fact that that's why you were blending the spiritual reflection with adventure. It You did a great job balancing those two together. Did you struggle balancing adventure with spiritual
Yeah,
reflection?
so first of all, I'm part of a couple writing communities, and I had some wonderful editors that came along the journey with me.
Okay.
And the I had probably 7 drafts. And so that balance between spiritual and adventure, that's something that was birthed over many editions, and a lot of bringing people in. I actually, so 3 things stand out to me during the writing process. And so anybody that's written a book, you'll totally understand this. The first reviewer that read my book, she goes, "I hate this book." And I go, "Why? Why do you hate it?" She goes, Arieh, how could he leave his mom like that?
Uh,
And so, yeah. And I go, well, he was broken. And she goes, well, help me understand. He has to leave a note or something. And so that's where, through her input, I put the notes in the story, and it really complemented the story, the narrative. I also had another person say, if he's really walking through the Nantahala, there's a lot of struggle. There's a lot of wild animals. There has to be a tragedy. Something has to happen. And so that's where the bear and the rattlesnake came from, is because studying in the Nantahala and the Smokies. Actually, I was in Cades Cove 2 weeks ago, and we saw a bear. So um, there's so all that said is that blend. A lot of that, the pacing. I have to give major kudos to the people in my writing group and the editors that supported me, because I had a lot of folks that went along on the journey with me. And this one editor, I know she's probably going to watch this. Her name's Maxine. She put hours.
Maxine.
Hi, Maxine. She put hours into this book because she believed in it.
I can see why. How long did it take you to write this book?
Um, a year.
Okay.
Actually, I think 11 months. But now let me back up. Probably a couple years of research and reminiscing, reflecting. Anybody who's written a book, it starts brewing slowly over time. And then finally the morning happens where you're like, you get the epiphany, you sit down to write.
Yeah,
And
mine
so,
mine was with me for years. And I
mhm,
finally decided I need to quit acting like it's not there. Just write it. So
yeah.
yeah, I get it. I you do a lot of talking about forgiveness.
Mhm.
That's hard for some of us. You do a lot of discussions about healing. Why were these the themes that you felt were important to tackle?
Those are the ones that kind of came out of my soul.
Okay.
Um, I don't know if I sat down as an architect and said, I'm going to do these themes. Actually, my writing process, you had asked about that in some of those questions you sent me. So just the way this happened is I sat down and I wrote the plot out. And so I have a friend, he's a mentor. He said, are you a plotzer or a pantser? And I go, what do you mean? He goes, do you write by your plot or do you write by the seat of your pants? And so what I did is I wrote the plot out for the story. And then I started laying it across history. I wanted to make sure historically accurate for the time period, starting in New York all the way down in the Smoky Mountains and all the different areas. And then I went and I started creating my characters, and I put as much flesh on my characters as possible, defining them as much as I could. And then once I had that, the story started to write itself. And so
Art.
some of those themes that were coming out were coming from the characters. And I would read some of this stuff and I was like, wow. And there was times I have to tell you, this is just, I don't know, as a writer, if you've ever experienced this, where your characters say or do something that you don't like. And then you've
Every
got
time
to
I sit down to write.
and so then you've got to like work that out in the book. You're like, what do I do with this? But it's a real feeling that's coming from somewhere. So those themes were coming out from the characters in the storyline. And ultimately, it was a reflection or a mirror of the things that I had in my heart. And I think at that time, I was dealing with a lot of that. And some of that was from, my family dynamics, things that had
The
happened in the last three or
resentment
five.
and
Yeah, it was kind of raw. Some of that was still kind of raw. And I actually had a good friend of mine that read the book. He goes, I could see that this was kind of a catharsis for you. I go, it was.
yeah, I could see that too. There was the theme of healing I needed for myself because I myself have been a little spiteful, trying to work on forgiveness, but not quite there yet. So
Hmm.
it was nice to see someone spelling all that out while still maintaining this kind of sense of adventure because I feel like it's either all or nothing. It's either all adventure with no theme or it's all spirituality and reflection. But rarely do you see those two combined together so beautifully where
Hmm.
it makes you reflect, but you still have fun along the way. But I
Yeah.
could still see how this could be a very cathartic process for you.
Yeah.
And I did ask you about your writing process. I'm glad that you told me that you were a plotter. I've always wanted to do that. I am not.
Mhm.
There's no point in me writing anything down on paper with an idea or an outline because it's going to do whatever they want to do. And don't feel bad because every indie author I've interviewed has said the same thing. Their characters do what they want to do. So you
Mhm.
aren't alone. Now, the Cherokee legend that you brought up, which is very deep, how how do you even begin to do the research to make
Yeah.
sure that you don't disrespect, that you stay true to the legend? I can't even imagine how deep you went into that process.
Yeah, so I'm very fortunate where I live. Literally 2.5 miles down the road is where Sequoia, the famous
Right.
Cherokee, um, he actually came up with the written language for the Cherokee. So there's a museum right there. Um, Fort Loudon is right down the street from my house, and so I'm so fortunate to have a lot of these great resources. In Hiawassee, there's a Cherokee museum. We've got actually, if you go up to Cades Cove in Townsend, there's so many great resources. And so research is actually, instead of looking, some of it was through a book, some of it through conversations, but some is actually, um, I've been it for being able to go to the places where these people, where they stood,
Cool.
and going to the locations in the book and actually sitting around and looking at the mountain, feeling the seasons, and experiencing for myself. I could see why the Cherokee felt like this place was magic, because it is magic.
That's really
And
cool. And
so,
when you were discussing with people, like when you were going to the museums, did you tell anybody that you were writing a book about this?
oh
Or did
no.
Nope.
Absolutely not.
Yeah, I don't think I told anybody I wrote a book until it had been out for 4 months, let alone go and
Yeah.
ask people for research. But I mean, living because I'm in Alabama, so I'm like very down at the base of the Appalachian Mountains. You really do kind of have this very vivid imagery of the mountains. It's beautiful. I wish I could kind of. You ever read a book that you wish you could go back and read again for the first time?
Oh yeah.
Some of your descriptions were like, I wish I could read that again for the first time. It was very impressive, but you also had this historical type of authenticity about early Tennessee and North Carolina.
Yeah.
How important was it for you to stay true to that? And do you feel like you did?
Yeah. Very important, because in order to ground the story as a historical fiction, it had to be true. And so, and I know that there's people that are really sticklers to everything from, what was the timeline of the book? What season was he climbing the mountain? um, what kind of crops are growing on the farms at what time of year? And, so I definitely wanted to get the message across that I was trying to convey. I wanted people to have trust and confidence in the research and into um, the history that went into the book. And so if you actually, when you read the book, you're going to see that the things that the blacksmith practices in the book were actually things that were done at that time. That's how they fixed a wagon wheel.
Yeah, I
That's
actually didn't know that. I feel like I was in some kind of learning lesson, like I was in school learning about things, but in a very creative way. I didn't know any of that.
Yeah, I didn't either when I started.
Okay, good.
I've
Because that would
never,
make me feel
yeah,
bad that I know probably more about Western civilization because that's what we always studied in school than I do about the things from the states that are just around where I'm living now.
yeah,
It was interesting. Now, that wasn't your first book though.
no,
Your first book was The Enchanted Forest.
yeah. The first book is a children's book, but it's
Yes.
actually it's a magical book, and kind of, so the story behind that, and just to kind of set it up with this little background. My aunt, my uncle, my wife, and I were all sitting in the living room 3 days after my dad passed. And if you've ever suffered loss, there's like the first week, it's like you're in a dream state.
Yep.
And we're all sitting there just numb. And my wife and I are talking about legacy. And so I have a brother and a sister, and we're talking about, dad's going to be remembered through us children. And my aunt and uncle, they're like, well, that's good, but we don't have any children. So what's our legacy? And I shared with my uncle and aunt, I said, well, you guys are you guys are special people to all us nieces and nephews. I mean, we love you, and you do have a legacy. And we're sitting in this moment, and my aunt and uncle have traveled all over the world, and they've got a carousel horse on top of a bookshelf. They've got a 6 foot tall sparrow on their back deck that my uncle won in an auction. They have a table that's a carved swan with a glass top on it. They have all
Very
these,
unique, to say the
yeah,
least.
very unique. They have a 6 foot tall carving from Africa that they went on a safari and got. And so I looked around the house and I looked at my aunt. I go, this place is like if I was a kid, place would be like a fantasy land. It'd be like Harry Potter land. And so they all started to laugh. And so I went home that night and I just started having fun. So no intent to write a book. I just started writing. If I was 8 years old and I walked into their house, what would I see? And I wrote about 20 pages of, the upstairs, the downstairs, the different bedrooms. And I gave it to some people and they're like, oh, this is fun to read. And they go, is this a book? I go, no, I'm just writing. If you're a writer, you just do the stuff. And so I was sitting and walking to my wife and I have coffee every morning at 8 in the morning. And we're sitting there having coffee. And my wife goes, this needs to be a story. You need to write this into a book. And so I go, you know what I'm going to do is I'm going to write this book and I'm going to give it to my aunt and uncle for Christmas.
Aw.
And so, yeah. And so my wife goes, they have to save the forest. They have to save the forest. My, my wife was born on Earth Day. Literally, she was born on April 22nd, 1970, when Congress enacted Earth Day. So we call her Earth Girl. And she's very in touch with the earth. And so
I love that.
she's like, they have to save the forest. They have to save the forest.
That's so cute.
And so the story, it took that one took 10 months to write. I hired a graphic artist, probably one of the most gifted artists I've ever met in my life. She turned the book into just absolute magic with pictures that I would say are better than Disney. And so the book just came together. And so I gave it to my aunt and uncle for Christmas. It
Yeah, I
was a
need to know
Christmas
how that
gift.
went. How did that go?
Well, I wrapped them in this big box and I just printed copies for them to have. And they opened them up and tears came and they were just blown away. And so then I started, mentioning it to all our neighbors, and the neighbors all wanted to read it because they've all been to their house. Um, and I've sold over 500 copies of it now.
Oh, wow. Okay, see, I'm
Um,
gonna have to get that because I have a very eclectic house myself. Like I always think if I die or if we're gone and they do an estate sale, someone's gonna walk in here and say, "Who lived here?" Like this must have been the weirdest individual ever. I'm
yeah.
gonna have to pick that up. I think I'm going to appreciate that. Oh, I love that they loved it.
Yeah, and the cool thing for me is I wrote it from the perspective of an 8-year-old.
Of a
And so for
child.
me, it brought me light and adventure and fantasy. And that year of healing after dad died, it brought me joy. And so I would escape to my book and just, I got to be a kid again. And so when I was writing, I was 8 years old. And I still remember, sitting around the dinner table and just giggling because some of the stuff that had come out in the book. And
Okay, this is
yeah,
adorable. I'm imagining you at dinner, like spoonful of mashed potatoes, just giggling randomly.
well, and you're an author, so the stuff sticks with you.
It
And so,
does.
when you're in the midst of writing a book, it becomes your second life.
That's true.
And
It's
it's
true.
almost like which life is real? Is it the book life or the life where you have your family? So,
Sometimes I prefer the book life.
yeah,
I love my family, but I always work my family into my book life somehow, so I can't seem to
yeah,
escape any of it. And you said that it includes illustrations, but I saw that it even includes recipes.
yeah. So I had again some wonderful editors. I've wonderful people that have entered my writing journey, and one of the editors, I put recipes in the book to really, I did it because I knew I was giving it to Uncle Gary and Aunt Joan for Christmas. That's my aunt and uncle's names. And I wanted to really honor them. And so my aunt is a brilliant cook. I mean, she is just amazing. And so I put um, some of my favorite meals that she prepares in the book. And so one of the editors goes, oh my gosh, can you tell me how to make that? And I go, yes, I can see.
Smart.
And so, anyways, so she's like, put that at the end of the book. She goes, you're telling people about these wonderful meals. Put the recipes at the end of the book.
That's
And
really
so,
smart.
yeah. And so people, I've gotten so much feedback. So, people are buying this for their grandkids, but I have like adults saying, I love the book. I've done the recipes.
That's what I'm just saying, is that was my question. I mean, it's obviously a children's book, but it sounds like the kind of book that I want to have on my shelf so I can read and
Yeah.
dive into. So adults are obviously getting something out of it. I I want to make what are one of the recipes that I can steal out of that book?
Well, there's a pork recipe. So for pork tenderloin with apple chutney.
Okay, yeah, that'll be the one.
Yeah.
I can already tell that'll
And,
be the
and
one.
it's absolutely amazing.
That's really thought it's creative to put the recipe, an actual recipe in the book. Somebody else was telling me, boy, the things I'm learning today, that they had a e-version of the book, and in between you could click on a link that would take to the music that they were listening to while they were
Oh,
writing that scene. And I was like, okay, that's brilliant. So now I want to do all of these things. I want to put music in there. I want to put recipes in there. I You people are I can't keep up with all of you. You guys have way too many great ideas that I'm going to steal all from. Do you really feel like that the Enchanted Forest helped you with your recovery process from grief or like
yeah,
taking that first step out?
it did. And when I handed the present to them on Christmas morning, not only did it provide that healing during the creative process, that place of escape, that place of, wonder and imagination, but I also had this great sense of gratitude once I gave them the gift and they realized that this was more than a book. This
This
really
is their
represented
legacy.
there's a legacy, and it was a family moment, and it's one of those family moments that becomes a watershed moment. Um, Very beautiful, and yeah, so I think I did. It helped me through my healing. I still, I still have my moments. The tears still come, but that was a vehicle that helped me work through a lot of things, to sit in my emotions and reflect and find healing on some of those dark moments.
What I love is that they were wondering what their legacy was going to be. And now every person who's bought the book and reads it to their child or their grandchild, and it becomes someone's favorite book, their legacy is continuing without even realizing it.
Yeah, over 500 people know Uncle Gary and Aunt Joan.
I love that so much. Okay, well, Uncle Gary and Aunt Joan, they're going to come to my house too because I need to kind of get a feel for
Yeah,
this. I feel like we adults forget that children's books can be for adults too.
yeah,
Now, you do have in both of your books the elements of nature and of faith and personal transformation. Why are these your core themes in your writing?
yeah. So I think, good question. So first of all, that's kind of who I am, and what comes out on the page many times, as I shared before, I don't know why they come out. And so some of the stuff I sit down and I never have sat down and said, This is what I want the world to know." Um, it just seems to bubble out. And so I think it's just a mirror, right? As a writer,
It
these are the
is.
reflective elements of who you are
Do
and
you
the
feel
things
like,
that I value.
yeah, and I you can see that through it. Do you have anybody or anyone that comes to mind who told you that your book has brought them some sort of peace?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I actually had, so if you go through Goodreads and you see some of the reviews, I had a couple people, so I'm part of a couple of different writing circles. And so I had one lady that said that it really, similar to you, it touched her heart in a way that she didn't expect. And actually, for her, brought healing to some situations that she was going through. And basically what you said today, as far as a book that turned on the tears for you, I'm sorry that I turned on the tears, but
Don't
hopefully it
be.
had a cathartic event for you. And
It was.
yeah,
And that's where I really wasn't. I usually like to go into a book not knowing anything. I think that makes it more of a real experience. I literally had no idea. I just went off the cover and the title. And I was quickly thrown for a loop. I wasn't expecting it to be historical. I wasn't expecting it to be so reflective. And yeah, it was definitely healing for me. It did give me a chance to sit back and reflect on what was going on in my own process, which is an ongoing process for anybody. I mean,
Yeah.
loss stays with you forever. I've lost my parents. I held the same similar kind of resentment that you held. It's hard to, as a human, as a person, as a woman, as a parent, to just process it all and not let it go somewhere. So it was kind of nice to
Yeah.
see your cathartic. When you were writing it, I could tell that you were kind of releasing things. It made it
Mhm.
me feel like it was okay to do that as well.
Yeah.
So you did a really great job getting to me, but I have to wonder, was there a chapter, and I'm now flipping back and forth, in the Waters of Awakening that was really hard for you to write?
The hardest chapter to write is when he went and confronted his mom after he'd been to the lake, and he travels back and he tries to mend um, that that torn relationship. And again, I don't want to spoil the book, but
Right.
that was so difficult for me to write. And that's something that I had to sit in my own emotions and work through things in my life as I wrote that chapter.
I don't know if I could write a book that dives so deep into feelings. I don't know if I could get through it. I just,
Yeah.
it, I always think that book should be an escape, but sometimes it's really good to have the escape, but also walk away with a reflection. So, what are you hoping that when someone closes your book, that they take away from it?
Yeah, thank you. Well, first of all, to go back to the last question,
I'm sorry.
remember I said, no, no, remember I said that sometimes characters do stuff that you don't want them to do, say things.
Yes. Yes.
You said you don't know if you could. I can't. It was my characters that did that.
Oh, it's true. There you go. It's
So, and I'm sitting there, I'm reading it going, why did you go there? So, anyways, what do I want people to feel?
yeah, to
So
take
my
away from
hope,
it.
yeah. So for the Waters of Awakening, I want people that read it to actually have that cathartic moment and think through in a reflective manner their own life and say, is there anything in this book that inspires me to find forgiveness? Is there anything in my own family and in the relationships? Are there things that need mending? Um, really looking at the end of the day, what matters in all of us. What is my identity? Is my identity my job, or is my identity a sense of calling? One of the things that I bring out in the book is the identity of Arieh. He really didn't know who he was. And so through the story, it's not until the last scene in the book that he really identifies with his true calling. And so, yeah.
I loved
And
it. I
then
don't
in
think
Enchanted Forest, I want people to close the book and I want them to tap into their childhood emotions of wonder and imagination and
feel the whimsy
fantasy,
again. Yeah.
feel the whimsy and close the book and just have a good laugh.
I am excited. That's going to be one that I'm going to order when this is done because I'm very curious about how I just miss those feelings of whimsy. And when you first experience that new book and it's so magical and you don't know, those are so hard to find when you're an adult because the real world has already beaten you down. And sometimes I find it in books. Like for some reason, Pete the cat brings out some whimsy in me. I don't know why, but it would be nice to read something that I can find some humor and hope and reflection in, and it still not be as deep as some of the
Yeah.
other things that I've been reading. Have you have an author that you has really or another book that you've read that's really inspired you?
Well, I have a lot of books, and I reflecting our question. And so, first of all, I love um, Tolkien. I love C.S. Lewis, and I think a lot of their writing styles have influenced who I am today. Some of the earlier books when I was in sixth grade, I read all this. I read all the C.S. Lewis books. I read all the Tolkien books. Um, I love Moby Dick. If you look at Herman Melville, if you look at Jules Verne, all the great
You're going to the
literary.
classics.
Yeah, but I'm tapping into the formative years of my youth. That was that was just so incredibly powerful for me as a young man, reading these stories and tapping into my imagination and just going to these places and living on that submarine, or being in Narnia, and just being transformed by the experience. And so my hope when I write is I could take people to a similar destination where they could live and they can breathe and they can experience a, a new reality that, creating cathartic moments, touching their hearts. Yeah, so I have a lot of the writers that have influenced me are the great writers of, fiction and fantasy.
I'm sitting here thinking. So I remember reading The Hobbit for the first time and being like swept away like I was in that world, or Lord of the Rings.
Yeah.
We recently reread The Hobbit out loud to my
Mhm.
son, and I remember that like really young feeling of reading that and being in awe and feeling like I'm swept up into it. But when you said that your hope that your writing was doing that, I probably had a spaced out look for a moment. I was thinking that's basically how I felt reading your book. So
Well,
was
that's a
that kind of
compliment. Thank you.
it really, I mean, and I didn't even
Mhm.
realize it until you said it. That's exactly how that felt. It was like being swept up into the story. And I may or may not have a couple of chills because that's exactly how it
Yeah.
felt when I was young, reading
Mhm.
those classic tales that I don't, and you rarely have that swept up moment anymore. That the stories aren't the
Yeah.
same as they used to be. Not that there's anything wrong with that. I mean, I write modern romance, but and urban fantasy, but whatever. I do kind of miss that idea of a tale that stays with you, like a journey that you go on. You just don't have that anymore. You by accident just made me think that that is exactly how I felt reading your book. So if I
Yeah.
spaced out, I apologize. That's why. It's because I was thinking, yeah, that's exactly what I did. I
Yeah.
vanished into his book, just like I did into Narnia. Into oh, and I remember reading C.S. Lewis for the first time and disappearing into the wardrobe. I remember what that felt like. This was very similar. All right. I'm over here having like moments while you're just waiting
Mhm.
for me to get past my own moment. I apologize.
Well, this is a conversation, right?
Right. I'm literally like having these aha moments as we go. Okay. So you like the classics. Is there any modern authors that you turn to?
Yeah, so I'm just a couple books. There's some great books that all of us can explore. I love historical fiction. I love the fantasy. Heather Morris, if you read some of the books, the trilogy, the Tattooist of, Auschwitz, and then, what is it? The Three Sisters and Sickla's Journey.
Yeah, those are hard to
Um,
read.
yeah, but again, it takes you there.
It
You live in
does.
the moment, and that's transformative literature that we all learn from it
That's
because we
true.
experience it, we feel it, it's in our bones. You can't escape the book when you're in it.
That's exactly how I felt. That's now I know that's exactly how I felt about yours. It was transformative fiction for me.
Mhm.
I will not read, and I do know her books. I can't go down the path of going that dark. Not yet. Before Loss, it was a lot easier for me to read those kind of books.
Yeah.
I'm not in the headspace where I can do that now. It when your bio mentions this, and I know we've talked about it a little bit about the seasons of grief and caregiving since your dad was at home with you.
Mhm.
Um, how did that being a caregiver especially affect your writing?
Well, when you're sitting there and you're watching somebody die, you have a lot of time to think.
Oh, that's true.
And, a lot of the things that we distract ourselves with every day, they all just vanish. And you start thinking about things like, who am I? And we all create these personas, and I don't care who you are, because we want to be accepted by the group. It's a human condition that we want acceptance. We want to be part of the group. So we create these personas for the world to see. We create these personas for us ourselves to see, so we can feel good about ourselves when we wake up in the morning. And at the end of the day, when you're on that bed, that deathbed, that's all stripped away,
That's true.
and nothing's there but you. And that thumbprint, your identity, your true self, what is that? And so in those moments, many hours, just watching my dad, the last 2 weeks, there was a lot of time that I sat by his bedside and just, you know, thought about, who is this man that's laying there? He's a giant. He's my hero. But who is he really? And then as far as, reflecting on yourself, who am I? When I strip away, yes, I won a poetry contest when I was in seventh grade. Yes, I've got this college degree. I got these plaques on the wall, but is that me? Is that really who I am? And so that season of caregiving, anybody who's actually sat by the bed of somebody who's on hospice, or they're transitioning to their next state, there's those moments where you really think, what do I want written on my tombstone? And it changes you. It changes you in profound ways.
It does. It makes you not care so much about the small things. At least for me, it made me realize that do I want to be a corporate girly forever, or do I want to be at home with my other son, spending time with
Yeah,
him? Do I really care what every person in town thinks about X, Y, and Z, or do I care about what my family thinks and the time that I'm
yeah,
spending with them? As opposed, because you can't get that time back. So yeah,
exactly.
yeah, I get it. Okay, Brian, I'm not gonna lie, I wasn't expecting to get all up in my feels today. So it's like a little therapy session. Um, are you working on anything else?
Yeah, so two books that I'm working on right now. So first of all, my mom gave me her journal. And so she actually is a cancer survivor. And so she actually had a diary that she had as she went through her therapies. She had some scary moments. She actually, at one point, after she had lost all her hair, she faced a death sentence, and she's still with us today.
Okay, great,
So,
great.
and so I have her diary through her treatment, her remission, her healing. And so I'm doing a collaborative book with her to write that journey out. And so,
Fun. That's a
yeah,
nice way for you two to bond.
yeah, I'm really excited about it. And I actually, in my desk drawer here, I've got a thick folder. And the thing is, it's all handwritten. So it all has to be entered in.
Yeah, that's
And so,
stressful.
yeah, at the, well, it's kind of like the book, as you enter this stuff in, this is your mom, this is her heart. It's hard
Oh,
to put that stuff in.
that's
And
really nice
so,
though, because then you can, where you're wondering, like, who is this person? You're getting to learn about it firsthand.
yeah. And so
That's
the second
powerful.
thing is, I want to do a sequel to The Waters of Awakening.
Okay,
And
I
my
was going to
uncle and
ask
I,
that.
yeah,
I'm going to need one.
yeah,
Not today, not next week. Give me some time to recover from reading this one. It's been
mhm,
about a week since I finished it. About a
okay.
week. And or maybe a little week and a half. And it's still lingering. So
It
shame
sticks
on
with
you.
you, doesn't it?
Yeah, it does. It's rude, Brian. Rude. It does stay. I'm excited about a sequel, but I think the idea of like collaborating with your mom is really exciting.
Yeah,
Is it going to be like for other cancer survivors?
yeah. So hopefully, people that have been diagnosed with cancer, they can find hope. People that are in the midst of treatment can find inspiration and courage. People that have gone through the journey and are at the other end, they could actually, you know, celebration and find in reading the book similar stories to share. And so, yeah, I think it's going to have quite the audience. I'm hoping that it really touches. There's so many people that have been devastated by cancer,
Yeah, my mom
and
passed of cancer, so of breast cancer. So it's I'd be curious if reading that will help me understand what she was going through
yeah,
because she didn't
well,
talk about it.
I hope it shines a light. There's so many homes that the darkness of cancer is just suffocating,
And
And
people are afraid
so,
to talk about it.
yeah,
And like I remember asking my mom, like, what's going on? How are you feeling? And she's like, I'm fine. It's fine. Which is
yeah.
probably where I learned the I'm fine, it's fine from. So it would be, I kind of wish there was something I could go back and read of hers that would give me an insight to what she was feeling when there were successes or when there were more complications. So yeah, I'm excited about that. Okay, you're just gonna have to get out of my life because you're gonna just have this whole big like emotional breakdown moment every time you put out a book, and I don't appreciate that. You ever want to write
Uh,
anything, another kid's book that's a little, upbeat?
oh, sure. I just, this just happens to be what's in my life right now. Uh, the sequel to The Waters of Awakening, I think it is going to be, a little bit more of an epic journey because what I want to do is there's a couple Cherokee warriors that are actually in The Waters of Awakening, so Bold Hunter and Kokachi. And
Mhm.
so I want to make sure some of the Indian Removal Act that happened in 1812 in Washington, D.C., Sam Houston was so frustrated with Washington, D.C. that he left and he went down into Kentucky and Tennessee, and he ends up in Texas. And so all that said is, I want to have some of that history, kind of an epic tale, historical fiction, because some of the stuff you don't have to fictionalize. It's just
That's true.
amazing the feats that these people did, the territory that they traveled without a car,
That's true.
the rivers and streams that they forged in canoes that are hewn from logs. It's absolutely amazing. And so the next book um, in the series of the Waters of Awakening is going to be something that hopefully it's an epic tale that transports people again back to the 1800s and to some of those adventures that really happened that are in the history books, but introduce people to the characters and the conversations and some of the emotional aspects, the fear that they were facing. We read in the history book and it's flat. You read in the history book that there was a battle on this field, but as an author, we have the ability to actually interject emotions. What was that soldier feeling as they're getting ready to pull that trigger and hearing those booms over their head?
Yeah, that's why I can't write that kind of stuff because I don't want to get into those feelings. But I can say that from reading Waters of Awakening and now stalking out your kid's book, that you'll do an amazing job with that. I remember reading it and closing it thinking I should message you and tell you how great it was.
Mm.
But I had to sit with it. I hope I wasn't the only one that had to sit. I hope
Yeah.
other people closed it and was like, okay, I'm gonna marinate in that for a month. Um,
Yeah.
yeah. Shame on you, Brian. Making me feel
Oh,
things. It's not
well,
okay.
that actually touches my heart. So thank you for sharing.
Well, do you have any advice for other authors who are starting off? I do
Yeah.
really want to say thank you for your book. I know I'm over here making jokes about it. I mean what I say.
Yeah.
It touched me deeply in ways that I didn't expect. And you do have a lot of good reviews. I did a quick skim through. I don't like to read a lot of people's reviews until I finish the book. Because I don't want that to give me any spoilers when I'm
Mhm.
going in. Do you have any advice for anybody who knows they have that story stuck in their head? They don't know how to get it out. What's the first step? What should they
Yeah.
do?
Well, so my advice is number one, just the value in daily writing. Um, and even if you don't have anything, people talk about writer's block and it happens, right? But there's days where you sit down to write and it just flows. And it just, it's like you're tapped into the faucet. And then there's days where it's a struggle. And, I think both have value because you have to sit in that moment. And as a writer, experiencing the prolific moments and the difficult moments, wrestling with the text and wrestling with the characters, you just got to do it. And so every day, sit down and write. Don't worry about grammar. Don't worry about punctuation. Don't worry about write as a conversation, not a performance.
That's good
And
advice.
yeah, and just get out there and get your feelings on the page. And then once you start getting the story developed, bring along people. I have such a great community of writers that are in my life, and they're becoming some of my best friends. And I just love, the sharing of ideas and getting around in a circle and just telling stories and tapping into your imagination. And so, how do you get started writing? Well, like I said before, you're either a pantser or a plotzer. I'm a bit of both. And so for me, I wrote out the plot, like I said, just so I'd have that structure. And then I wrote the rest by the seat of my pants. Actually, the characters wrote the book. Um, but people that are getting started, if you don't understand the hero's journey, that would be something to understand. Understanding what it means when somebody says, what's the character's arc? What's the storyline? There's some basic literary tools that are out there. Um, I actually have a book here. Let me see. It's a thesaurus of emotions. Every writer should have an emotional
We
thesaurus.
do. It's actually
well,
smart.
well, there's just so many wonderful tools out there. But I guess my biggest piece of advice is don't let fear cripple your creativity and just write.
Just
And
right.
again, just write for the sake of writing. Sit in that moment and just get it out on a piece of paper. I find that for me, my emotions flow through my pen better than they do out of my mouth. So
So true. As someone who can talk to a wall, it's never
yeah.
coherent, but when I'm putting it on paper, have you ever like gone back and read your writing and thought, I wrote that? Because that's what happens to me all the, did I wrote that? Look at me.
Well, the
Because
season of healing, I was bawling like a baby. I read that chapter. I'm like, there's no way I wrote this because it was so powerful and it just hit my heart in such a meaningful way. I'm like, this is not me.
that's when you go, dang, I am good.
Well, I don't know, but
You're allowed to. You're allowed to be in love with your own work. You think it doesn't really work if you're
Mm,
not. I think what you're doing is great. I think your story and the epicness of what you're building is great. I love the fact that you're like me later in life.
mhm,
I'm finding that a lot of authors in the indie author community are all a little bit later in life, taking that journey and the step for the first time. I
mhm.
don't know if it's because we were all too afraid to do it before or because we were in careers and jobs and we just didn't
Yeah,
have the time. But I enjoy seeing people who are, I don't want to say old, although I feel old. But later in life, more seasoned,
yeah.
going back and grabbing it by the horn and saying, I can do this too. I think it's great. And I think
Thank you.
you are a great example of you can still make epic stories at any point in your life, especially after loss and grief, because we just
Yeah,
don't talk about it enough.
I appreciate that. That means more than you know. And thank you for inviting me to this show. I didn't know what I was going to get, but I feel like I've made a friend. And
Oh,
so,
absolutely. Please come and see me again. Don't disappear. I need to get into your writing groups apparently because my writing group is me and my best friend and my editor, and all we do is fight.
oh,
She's like my first
well,
beta reader. My editor and I fight, and I'm afraid to. We I think writing groups can be extremely helpful and being able to bounce ideas off of.
yeah.
And maybe sometimes it shouldn't be like your brand new best friend or your 20, 30 year old best friend because they're going to lie to you. They're going to
Mm,
tell you the things like, oh, it's great. It's wonderful. I wouldn't change a thing when you know
yeah.
they should tell you
Well,
the truth.
some of the best parts of the book came from critical criticism. And so,
That's what I need. And I think everybody's
yeah,
too afraid to give that to me. Maybe they're afraid of how I'm going to react.
yeah.
You seem like the most calming person ever. Like you would not react to anything.
Mm,
You should lead
well,
like meditation groups. You have a voice for that.
uh,
But thank you so much for coming and hanging out with me today, Brian. I will put all of your stuff on the screen and down in the description, and I'll send this to you when it goes up. You have been a joy and a pleasure. And thank you so much for letting me have access to your book so I could feel something for the first time in a while. It meant more to me than you realize.
Oh, you're welcome. I appreciate it. Send me your address and I'll send you a signed copy of The
Oh, I
Enchanted
would love
Forest.
that.
Yes.
Yes, please do. And then I
So
can force my husband to read it.
there you go.
It's signed, honey. You have to. Yes, I'll do
Um,
that. And I will make sure people know where to find your book. Do you have a website?
so they're available on Amazon, on their Kindle. Both of them are Kindle Unlimited, so there's no cost if you have Kindle
Is your
Unlimited.
other one on Kindle Unlimited?
Yes, exactly. And then they're both on Ingram, and so you could order them on Ingram. And so, um, yeah, I don't have a website. I need to
Oh,
do
well,
that.
yes, your next
It's
step then.
yeah.
Yeah, I'll put all the. I'm gonna go and download your other one because I didn't realize that was on Kindle Unlimited. But I think that's one I need to experience in person.
Okay.
I feel like that's one of those books that you need to actually like hold and see and get into the magical moment of it. But I will read it because I'm very curious now about your aunt and uncle. All right, I will let you get back to your day. I see your book in the background there. It's a beautiful cover. You've done great. Your book is amazing. You're amazing. I really enjoyed this.
Yeah. Thank you for inviting me to your show. And again, send me that address. More than honored to send you a book. And
I
I
will.
look forward to talking to you again.
Yeah, hopefully we can do it when your next book is out, or if you
Mhm.
just get bored and you just want to talk to somebody, just let me know.
Sounds good.
All
Thank you
right,
so
thanks,
much.
Brian.